In this video, we're going to be going over how to use Fiverr rather than through individual sales in order to have your embroidery design digitized or otherwise improved through using the embroidery services available on this gig economy platform. So what is the gig economy? The gig economy essentially is just the part of the economy that is made up of small or short-term contracts. So Fiverr is one such platform where it's an online version of the gig economy where you can put out and advertise the gigs or the short-term or small contracts that you need fulfilled, and it will match you with someone who is willing to do that work, as opposed to going to an established business or having longer term contracts or salaried employees. Sometimes you just need a one-off service or a one-off purchase. In this case, digitizing one embroidery file as a one-time thing. It's not like you're digitizing hundreds or thousands of embroidery files. And so the gig economy is a really great place to have that service need met by someone who usually specializes in these kinds of small short-term contracts. So here you can see a collection of companies and platforms that operate within the gig economy. So essentially what these platforms provide, like Fiverr, is a matchmaking service between people who have those smaller short-term contracts that need to be fulfilled and people who are willing to do that work. Most notably, Uber is probably one of the most famous gig economy-based platforms where the drivers for Uber are not salaried employees or even long-term contractors of Uber. They are gig economy workers, which means that all Uber is doing for them as drivers is to match them up using the Uber platform to people looking for those one-off rides, similar to Lyft. And the consumer is also not looking for a full-time driver. They are just looking for one trip from A to B usually. And so Uber and Lyft, as an example, provide that matchmaking service. How they fund themselves is that they usually take a percentage of the revenue or profits from the transaction between these two individuals, the consumer and the gig economy worker. And that's essentially how they fund the platform to keep it going. So Fiverr is one of these gig economy-based platforms, and I've used it for a number of years for short-term contracts. They're particularly famous for graphic design, marketing, and little programming and tech features there. Again, you're not looking for a lot of work done. You're just looking to have a sticker made, a logo made, a video brightened, some photos repaired, a few embroidery files digitized, that sort of thing. So it's a matchmaking service. So people advertise on Fiverr their services, as you can see here, just as the Fiverr homepage, upscaling images, making stickers, fixing photos, that sort of thing. They'll advertise their services. And so you can search within Fiverr to find services, to find a vendor that's offering the service you're looking for. And then you can match with them and tell them a little bit about what your ask is or what your order is, and they can give you some offers about what they would charge to accomplish that task. What I particularly like about Fiverr is that you can put out many, many requests to a whole bunch of vendors selling services on Fiverr, and then you can compare the offers that you get back all on the same platform. And they usually will give you a little bit of their reasoning for the prices, and then from there you can take a look at the comparison between all of these vendors for this one service you're looking to have fulfilled, and then you can only move forward with the one vendor you really want to. So as an example, I'm going to use this gentleman named Mark Digitizer, who I've used in the past to digitize some embroidery files. So you can see here, after I searched the services in the upper left-hand search bar, and I just searched, like embroidery digitizing. He was one of the vendors who came up, and this is a little preview of the particular service that he is offering. So he says, I will do professional embroidery digitizing in hours. You can see that he has 2,000 plus reviews and a 5-star rating. You can also see that on the right-hand side, he offers a basic, standard, and premium package. For this particular example, I'm just going to focus on the basic package, but it's not uncommon for vendors on Fiverr to have different levels of the quality of work or the quantity of work that they are willing to do. So this basic package is usually for a cap or chest logo. And it lists the details here, 1-day delivery, you can have it revised unlimited times. There's an initial concept and a source file, and that price is about $7 Canadian, give or take. Remember, this price does not include ultimately what Fiverr is going to take out of, this particular seller's pocket as their matchmaking fee. And it also does not include taxes, and it also does not include the tip to the vendor. So in the gig economy, tips are really where the vendors make their money. If you're really happy with your service, I do recommend tipping them, because really the $7 fee barely covers their labor, and what they're really being paid for in tip is not unlike, waitresses or servers, service-based industry people as well. Primarily their income comes from tips, because Fiverr is going to take a big slice of any money that they make from this base $7 cost as that matchmaking fee. So if you scroll down onto this item page, you can still see that, it has the basic, standard, premium package, but the description of the gig or the service that is being offered includes some extra details that are really important to us, so that we can see that he will take 2 to 24 hours to depending on the complexity of the design to digitize it. He advertises that he's very quality oriented, and that he does unlimited revisions, and that he also will provide certain file formats, and that you can also reach out to him about what other file format you might need, and the type of file type he needs from you as the consumer in order to digitize. And again, most sellers will end with, any questions, please reach out to me, and we'll get to that in just a minute. So here are some details. If there was anything that he wasn't comfortable doing, or he didn't have the capable skills to do, he would list it here. For example, if he, for whatever reason, could only digitize, let's say up to 12 colors, this description area here is where he would include that in the description of the gig or the service. So I decided to move forward with the basic package, and now it takes me to this new page called Order Details. So there's 3 steps in ultimately completing the order request. Number 1, we're on right now, Order Details. Number 2, Confirm and Pay. And number 3, Requirements. So here it lists the service that we selected, so the professional embroidery digitizing in hours. And it also gives us the option below to add extras to that $7 base cost. So you can see here that if you want a vector file, you can add that on for $13.24 Canadian. And if you want to add additional concepts, that is also an additional $7. So here, when I'm using this service to digitize, let's say, a design that I need for a client where I don't have the time to digitize it myself, or it's a particularly difficult image to digitize myself with my skill set, I will use one of these sellers. But normally I personally add on the vector file option, regardless of the, almost $14 cost. Because I have a background in graphic design, that vector file is going to be easier for me to work with in the future if I find I need to make little tweaks to the design and re-digitize it myself, rather than going to the original digitizer all over again if the tweak is so small in the first place. So if we click on the Continue to Checkout button on the right-hand side here, you'll see that it also notices that below it, you won't be charged yet. So what Fiverr does that I really enjoy is that Fiverr will hold the money that you intend to pay the vendor with in escrow. And that basically means that because Fiverr is the matchmaking service, it will hold the money for you from the seller in Fiverr's bank while you guys work out this transaction to completion. So there's no danger about paying the vendor for the service and then the vendor disappears into a waft of smoke with your money, because Fiverr is not going to pay the vendor until the vendor indicates to Fiverr that the transaction has been completed to your satisfaction. so that you're entering into a contract essentially through this matchmaking service with this particular vendor. And only once the contract terms are fulfilled will Fiverr release that money from escrow and pay the vendor and then take their matchmaking fee. You can also see here that Fiverr takes PayPal, Visa, MasterCard, Discover, and a few others. And what I really enjoy is that if you are self-conscious about putting your credit card details into these kinds of platforms, you could also just pay via PayPal. So again, PayPal is also another kind of brokering or matchmaking service where PayPal will hold the money in escrow as well for Fiverr, for you and the vendor while you complete this contract. And then PayPal also additionally holds your credit card information secure, because you can load up your PayPal account from your debit account or your credit card account and just move money through PayPal itself. So again, we're just going to click the continue to checkout big green button on the right hand here to move to the second step, confirm and pay. So the confirm and pay page is very straightforward. Here you have an old MasterCard of mine, and you also have the option to click more payment options. So if this is here where you would click the drop-down menu there and then select PayPal and log into PayPal in order to process the transaction. But since I'm using a MasterCard, I don't need to worry about that. And on the right-hand side, again, you can always see the summary of what you are ordering here. So again, it's that gold basic package for about $7 Canadian, unlimited revisions, one concept included. And this is where if you had a promo code from Fiverr, like I'm a VIP with Fiverr since I spend so much money through the platform, I often get promo codes to get discounts on my services, which means that Fiverr will pay the difference of that discount for me. So the vendor still gets paid, but I am, as the consumer, I'm paying less through the promo code. There is that service fee. So that is the service fee that Fiverr is going to charge for processing the transaction. MasterCard charges them for using MasterCard processing. Fiverr also needs to obviously maintain and pay for their platform and website and bank accounts and all the management behind that. And so ultimately, with the service fee and plus the base cost of about $7, this particular bid right now, even before I upload the file, is looking like it's going to be about $10 Canadian, and the delivery time is going to be about 1 day. And again, this is really important to notice because it does not include the tip that we will add at the end. That will be completely separate. And so that's just something to keep in mind when you're pricing things out. And again, to also keep in mind, this is before we have uploaded the file. So this is just our best understanding that what we think we need is just the gold package for $7. The vendor might disagree, and we'll get into that in the next step. So once we click confirm and pay and we process all of our accounts, we're taken to step 3 for submit requirements. So step 3 is where you as the consumer need to communicate to the vendor what you are looking for. What terms of this contract do you need to be satisfied for the vendor to get paid? So this is where you would put in information to describe the service that you are looking for. The vendor has done a little bit of that work for you because they've advertised to you, this gold basic package for digitizing services is for digitizing embroidery files. So that's kind of what they're expecting you to describe here. But the specifics, like changing colors or maximum colors they can use, or how big they want the end product to be, any changes from the reference image you may or may not upload might be included here, that sort of thing. So this is an opportunity to really articulate your needs, because it's not just on the vendor to be a mind reader. You also have to communicate what you are looking for to be satisfied. So here is just an example of what I see a lot for people who are looking to get services done through Fiverr. Here you have a very, very generic ask, a very generic contract term. Please digitize the attached file, file name .png as an example, using 7 colors maximum and exporting it as a PES file type from my brother machine. So at face value, this might look like it has enough information. And presumably there would be a reference image attached here in the PNG format that the description previously listed as being an OK file type for the digitizer to reference. But if you notice here, it does not necessarily state the 7 colors that they are looking for. So if the reference image itself contains more than 7 colors, it's going to be up to the vendor to make some critical decisions about what colors will the consumer ultimately want in that 7-color package. It also doesn't really include anything about the size and the end version that they're really looking for. Like if this is going to be a patch, for example, they might want a certain finish around the edges. If this is going to be embroidered onto a delicate fabric, there might be other underlying stitches that they might want. So really just this description does not have a lot of information that the vendor's probably going to need, which means they're going to waste time reaching out to you and explaining to you what they need you to articulate so that they can move forward with satisfying your request. So ultimately, again, this is just not a great description. It's too sparse. The information that it contains is not really useful to the vendor, though it's probably meaningful to the consumer. And so really the vendor needs more context here. More information is always better, and the vendor can always message you back just to clarify some details. But it's important that if you're on a particularly time-sensitive turnaround for getting this digitized and possibly made for your project, that you don't want to waste time, back and forth, one business day, I find, per message, sorting out the particular requirements. It's better just to be clear and upfront from the get-go. So for this example, you can see that this is what I submitted for my requirements. And even I admit that I could have been clearer, I could have been more concise, but essentially I had a client who was looking to have a patch made of their personal online character that was a fox, and they wanted it as an iron-on patch. And I was completely swamped with other projects, so I thought that, you know what, I don't have time to digitize this myself. I'd rather just export it, and then I can pass on the costs to the client, and the client of mine was okay with this. So this was the description that I sent to the vendor as part of fulfilling the order. So I attached a JPEG that was the reference image provided by the client. And I said, attached image needs to be made into an iron-on patch. I want only the main colors in the embroidery design. And here I listed them: red, light red, white, light green, dark green, black, and yellow, as close to the colors in the design as possible for shades. This is important because in the embroidery software often used to digitize, there are capabilities to match colors to certain threads as much as possible. Moving on, I included satin stitch for the outside of the patch, but flat stitch for everything inside. I want it to be efficient to do on the embroidery machine, no swapping back and forth between colors, no random bits of designs as separate pieces, one layer for each color, that's it. Needs to look as close to the original design attached here as possible. Max patch size 5 by 3 inches. And you can see here that I did attach a JPEG as the, again, the reference image provided by the client. So you can see here that I included some extra details compared to the previous description. So I explicitly said that this is going to be an iron-on patch. I explicitly included the colors that I was looking for, and I referenced them back to the reference image attached. I specified the type of finishing stitch on the outside of the patch I wanted, and I specified my goals of it being efficient on the machine, i.e. I need the colors grouped together so that I'm not losing labor time switching back and forth between colors. And ideally, I want all the colors on the same layer. So that, again, will prevent that switching back and forth between colors. And so there's obviously going to be some design challenges for the vendor there, which is why I'm paying them for the service to organize the design for the end goal with all of these requirements. And finally, I also attached the max patch size being 5 by 3. This is really important because when you scale up or down in embroidery software drastically, you often do lose fidelity in the design. So if I don't state the size of my patch, again, the vendor knows that embroidery software has this limitation. So they're going to reach out to me and clarify the size before moving forward. And I'm going to lose time in responding to that because I didn't include it from the get-go in ultimately getting this patch out to my client. So if I said incorrectly, I only want the patch to be 5 by 3, but let's say I wanted to actually, let's say something crazy, like 10 by 12 inches, right? That needs to be essentially re-digitized, and that's probably going to be way more work for the embroidery digitizer than they initially agreed to with me selecting only the $7 option, right? So this is why sizes are really important, because it's not as easy as it being digitized and then just being scaled up. Much like with how we scale up images, it will get fuzzy, it will become distorted, and so it really needs to be optimized for the particular end size you are looking at. So once you've submitted your requirements though, and you've attached your reference images, you can click the green button on the right-hand side for ordering. Since I've already used this vendor, it's a past purchase I've made. Mine says order again, but this is just where you would finalize the details of your request. So here you can see the reference image I was provided in detail. So here it's nice and big, and you can see the fox character that my client wanted as an embroidery patch. And so the big leap of faith with using gig economy platforms is that you don't completely control the process in which the vendor is going to fulfill your contract. So so you have to be a little bit patient and also be prepared that some revisions might be needed. This is why this particular vendor listed unlimited revisions as a selling point, because I might change my mind about the size of the patch or certain features once I see the first draft of it being digitized. But for now, while the vendor works on it, I have no idea what the end product might look like, especially if I'm unfamiliar with embroidery digitizing software in general. I am familiar particularly with Hatch, so I have an idea of how this might be digitized if all my directions are followed correctly, but there still might be little differences that come out unexpectedly in order to satisfy my particular requests about like the layers and the colors and that sort of thing. We just won't know until we get the end product, and from there we can talk about revisions with the vendor. So here is a snapshot of the timeline that this service ended up taking. So I placed the order September 25th, and then at the end of the day, around September 25th, the vendor confirmed the order, but they also clarified after seeing my little reference image and seeing my description that the gig is actually more expensive than what I thought it would be. So this is the matchmaking service side of it, and why Fiverr takes that percentage cut. Is that I thought this would be a $7 job, that basic package that he advertised. And so here is him communicating very clearly that this design is going to cost $10 more, because this design is way more detailed than really what he does for that basic package. So either I can simplify the design for him and keep it at that price, or he'll have to charge me an additional $10 because of the level of detail. So this is him communicating clearly, please let me know if you want to increase the price by $10 to move forward. And ultimately, I did go for increasing the detail of the design per the client's request. So because we spent some time communicating about the price and the price changing, the delivery date you can see at the very top here was changed to an additional day. That's perfectly normal, and that's why I say to bake in some time for negotiations or clarifications or revisions, because I did not know that my design by this particular vendor's standards would be considered more detailed than the basic package. So you can see here, if you scroll down to September 26th, I said, yes, please update the offer, send it back to me with the additional $10, and then we can move forward. So later on the 26th, after I had updated the new contract terms by accepting the new offer with that additional $10 for the added detail that the vendor had sent over, you can see here that they delivered my contract. So you can see here that there is a DST, PDF, EMB, and JPEG files attached. In our previous video, we talked about zip files and folders. And so really, if this vendor wanted to zip everything up in one folder and just title it the order number that Fiverr generates, he could have easily done that as well. But it's convenient for us here is that we can see we have the DST version, a PDF and a JPEG image version, and then the EMB file type, which is used by the software application he likely used, which is the same that I use, which is Hatch. EMB is the file type for Hatch, and DST is a standard type, for industrial machines, but it was really easy for me to convert it in Hatch to the file type I needed. So you can see through these little images that we already have a bit of a preview of how this vendor digitized the image that I sent him. So we will open up those files in a minute, but I can tell you from my memory of this particular order that I was really happy with it at the end of the day. The lines came out clean. It was very easy to print. At some point, I might amend this video to include the end product. But essentially, I gave him 5 stars. Reviews are really, really, really important on Fiverr, so it's always good to check them out. And it's always good to leave one. I also included a tip. And so you can see here that the tip with the fees associated with what Fiverr and MasterCard take out of the tip is listed here as about $17 Canadian. And I was more than happy to tip that because this vendor was able to get me my very detailed digitized design back to me in about 24 hours, which was fantastic for my client. The vendor, much like other gig economy platforms like Uber, matchmaking is a two-way street. I get to rate the vendor gets to rate me. And so this particular vendor also rated me 5 stars. And normally they honestly will. They're very keen to, to have word of mouth, to work with people. It's pretty hard to upset a Fiverr vendor, but it's also to your benefit to be kind to them, to be patient with them, and also to clearly communicate so that they absolutely understand what your needs are. And you can see here at the very bottom, it says the order is complete. And if I needed to have any further communication with the seller, like let's say I notice when I'm actually embroidering the file that something's really, really wonky and that was not fixed, it violated the terms of the contract we entered, then I would just message them and I might open up a dispute just to get them to resolve the situation. Usually it's a quick fix, and just to notify them that I'm having this problem ultimately embroidering them. And that would all be done through the inbox first, just the regular messaging platform. You wouldn't open another order for something that the vendor really should be fixing for you completely free anyways. Here you can see a preview of that digitized file here in my Hatch software. So one thing I want to note is that there was a bit of a miscommunication here where the satin stitches were used for the eyelashes as well as the outline of the patch. Since I know I wasn't clear with like what I meant by flat stitch, which is also called the tatami stitch in Hatch, I just went ahead and because it was so well digitized, I just selected those sections around the eyelashes and I just moved them to tatami here. But you can tell otherwise, the colors are great. It fits my requirements. It fits my size. And so I was really, really happy with this. He even did a great job around the teeny tiny little teeth that are featured in this design and the nose, and it was perfectly mirrored. And I was just so, so happy to not have to worry about digitizing this myself, and that for a very reasonable fee, I could have it digitized by someone on Fiverr. And if anything, if I had more designs for more clients all grouped together, I could also have saved probably a little bit of money by just packaging them all together as a single offer for, let's say, 5 designs, and probably would have gotten a way more competitive rate because when you're already digitizing and in the groove, it's really not that much labor to digitize a few more images for the same client at the same time. So here you can see a comparison between the reference image and the digitized version here. Pretty awesome. Again, pretty high fidelity between the reference image and the ultimate embroidery file. So fidelity, again, means trueness to the design. So really a lot of details have not been lost in this process. It's pretty comparable. You can see here that there was some simplification of the teeny tiny teeth, again, in the design, which I find to be perfectly reasonable. As someone who digitizes themselves, I understand that, your needle is only so small, and you're also embroidering over multiple layers. So when you have teeny tiny spaces, you have to simplify them a little bit. And that's a very, very normal expectation that's going to happen in order to keep the design looking good in this new version of it.